Have you ever noticed how some people can be deeply loving without ever being disrespected or walked all over? Most people live in a false dichotomy, believing that to be loved, you need to be submissive, or that to be respected, you need to be cold and distant. But the reality is much more sophisticated, and for some, revealing about how healthy relationships really work. Every intimate interaction, every family conflict, every moment of vulnerability has invisible layers of emotional dynamics operating silently. While you believe that true love means accepting any treatment or being understanding without limits, others are consciously navigating these waters with an internal compass that protects their energy and dignity. The most liberating truth about relationships is this: you can love deeply and still teach people how to be treated. When you confuse love with emotional submission, you are not being loving. You are being neglectful of your own energy and, ironically, teaching others to disrespect you. Emotional strength isn't about building walls or becoming insensitive. It's about developing such deep clarity about your own worth that you naturally refuse to accept treatments that diminish your energy or dignity. It's about loving from a place of wholeness, not need. What you'll discover today aren't techniques for becoming cold or manipulative, but rather strategies for cultivating an emotional presence so solid that respect emerges naturally, even in the most intimate relationships. The question isn't whether you deserve respect, you do. The question is, will you continue teaching people not to respect you through your own lack of boundaries? Or will you start demonstrating through your behavior the standard of treatment you accept? Get ready to discover how true emotional strength protects both you and the quality of your relationships. 3. The laws of power rule. 1. The art of loving without losing yourself. The tactic. You develop the ability to engage emotionally deeply while maintaining a core of identity and values that remains untouched, regardless of the emotional demands of others. True love includes self-love as its foundation. This rule operates on the fundamental principle that healthy relationships require two whole people, not two people fused into a codependent emotional dependence. In practice, this means maintaining your hobbies, values, opinions, and personal needs, even when social or emotional pressure tempts you to abandon them. You can implement this through regular check-ins with yourself. Does this decision honor my values? Am I acting out of love or fear of losing approval? Does this dynamic energize me or drain me? When you notice that you're consistently abandoning important aspects of yourself to keep the peace, it's time to RACALIBRAT. Timing is crucial. You establish boundaries gently but firmly when the first signs of disrespect appear, not after toxic patterns have already been established. It's easier to maintain boundaries than to rebuild them. The key is to communicate your needs as facts about yourself, not as demands on others. I need time alone to recharge, instead of you being suffocating. The psychology behind maintaining self-identity in relationships activates what psychologists call healthy interdependent relationships. When you maintain your sense of self, you can genuinely love because you are choosing to love, not desperately needing approval. From a neurological perspective, this works because it preserves activation of the prefrontal cortex, the area of conscious decision-making, even in emotionally charged situations. When you lose your identity in relationships, you operate more often from the amygdala, the fear center, making decisions based on abandonment anxiety. When you apply this rule, you're essentially modeling for others how healthy relationships work. This builds respect because it demonstrates self-awareness and integrity. The reason this is so effective is that people are naturally drawn to those who have a solid identity. It suggests emotional stability and reliability. Rule 2. The power of non-negotiable limits. The tactic. You clearly identify and communicate which behaviors, treatments, or dynamics you absolutely do not accept, and then maintain those boundaries consistently, regardless of emotional pressure or manipulation. Limits are not suggestions, they are personal policies. This approach is based on the understanding that teaching people how to treat you is an act of love for both you and them. When you allow disrespect, you are enabling toxic behaviors that harm the quality of your relationship. Implementing this requires you to first identify your non-negotiable boundaries, types of communication you don't accept, behaviors that drain your energy, dynamics that violate your core values. Then you communicate these boundaries clearly and maintain consistent consequences when they are violated. You can enforce this through direct, calm communication. I don't accept being yelled at. If you continue yelling, I will withdraw from the conversation until we can talk respectfully. Then you follow through with the consequence without drama or anger, just firm consistency. The most effective contexts are situations where negative patterns are beginning to form. It's crucial to establish boundaries early, before problematic behaviors become normal in the relationship dynamic. Avoid setting limits as punishment or during moments of anger. Limits should be set from a place of clarity and self-care, not emotional reactivity. The psychology behind consistent boundaries create what psychologists call structural safety in relationships. When people know exactly where the boundaries are, they can relate more authentically because they don't have to guess what's acceptable. Psychologically, this works because it activates the structure and predictability system in other people's brains. People feel more secure when they know the rules of the relationship. Even if they don't always like those rules, the mechanism works by creating natural consequences for behaviors. When you consistently maintain limits, you're not punishing. You're simply allowing the natural consequences of the behavior to unfold. Neurologically, this reduces stress for both parties because it eliminates uncertainty about what's acceptable. The brain spends less energy trying to figure out the rules when they're clear and consistent. People respond positively to clear boundaries because it shows that you value yourself enough to protect yourself, which paradoxically makes them respect you more. Rule 3. Emotional clarity over reactivity. The tactic. Instead of reacting emotionally to provocations, manipulations, or problematic behaviors, you respond from a place of conscious clarity, separating your feelings from your strategic response. You feel deeply, but act intentionally. This rule operates on the fundamental principle that automatic emotional reactions often perpetuate toxic dynamics, while conscious responses can transform or improve relationships. In practice, this means creating a space between stimulus and response. When someone acts in a way that would normally trigger an automatic emotional reaction, you pause, observe your feelings without judgment, and then choose a response that serves the long-term relationship. You can implement this through emotional regulation techniques, deep breathing, pausing for 10 seconds before responding, and asking yourself, how do I want this interaction to end? Before reacting, the goal isn't to suppress emotions, but to not let them automatically guide your actions. Timing is crucial. You practice this skill in low-stakes situations first, developing the muscle of conscious response before applying it in major conflicts. The key is to validate your own feelings internally while externally choosing the most effective response. I'm feeling angry, and that's valid. Now, what response will best serve this situation? The psychology behind conscious versus reactive responding activates different neural networks in the brain. When you respond consciously, you are using the prefrontal cortex area of executive function, which allows for more sophisticated decision-making and consideration of long-term consequences. Psychologically, this works because it breaks automatic patterns of emotional escalation. When you don't fuel drama with reactivity, it often naturally dissipates. Psychologically, this exploits the fact that much interpersonal conflict stems from automatic chain reactions. When you break this chain through conscious response, you can redirect the dynamic. The mechanism works through modeling emotional regulation. When you demonstrate emotional self-control, it often inspires others to elevate their own behavior as well. Neurologically, Practicing mindful responding strengthens connections between areas of executive control and emotional regulation, improving your overall ability to navigate challenging situations. People respond positively because they feel safer with someone who is not emotionally unpredictable or reactive. Rule 4. Protecting your energy as a sacred responsibility. The tactic. You treat your emotional and mental energy as a precious resource that should be invested consciously, not wasted on drama, unnecessary conflict, or trying to change people who don't want to change. Your energy is your responsibility to protect. This approach is based on the understanding that you can't give what you don't have. To be truly present and loving in relationships, you need to maintain healthy reserves of emotional energy. Implementing this requires you to develop sensitivity to your own energy fluctuations. Which interactions energize you versus which drain you? Which environments restore versus which deplete? Which conversations are productive versus which are circular and destructive? You can do this by making conscious decisions about where to invest your energy, limiting time spent on pointless conversations, avoiding attempts to solve other people's problems that they don't want to solve, choosing to engage only with people who are open to constructive interactions. The most effective contexts are situations where you've historically engaged in dynamics that drain energy without producing positive results. By recognizing these patterns, you can consciously choose different ways to respond. Avoid using energy protection as an excuse to avoid legitimate responsibilities or difficult but necessary conversations. The art lies in distinguishing between productive energy investment versus destructive waste. The key is to communicate your energy boundaries, lovingly but firmly. I care about you, and I need to be in a clearer mental space to have this conversation productively. The psychology behind conscious energy management explores the psychological reality that emotional resources are finite and need to be restored. Psychology studies show that emotional depletion reduces our ability to make good decisions and maintain self-control. From a neurological perspective, this works because it recognizes that the brain uses glucose as fuel for executive functions. When you're emotionally drained, your ability to respond consciously versus reactively significantly diminishes. Psychologically, this activates the principle of self-care as a prerequisite for caring for others. When you protect your energy, you can be more present when you choose to engage. The mechanism works by preventing emotional burnout by maintaining energy reserves. You can respond to important situations to your best ability instead of reacting from exhaustion. People respond positively because protected energies mean that when you choose to engage, you are truly present and available, not emotionally exhausted or resentful. Rule 5. The art of teaching by example, not words. The tactic. Instead of trying to convince people how you should be treated through arguments or pleas, you consistently demonstrate the standard of treatment you accept through your actions and responses. People learn more from what you do than from what you say. This rule operates on the fundamental principle that behavior breeds behavior. When you consistently model self-respect, you unconsciously teach others to respect you as well. In practice, this means stopping explaining or justifying your boundaries and simply maintaining them. Instead of saying, "You shouldn't talk to me like that because it hurts my feelings," you simply calmly and consistently withdraw. When disrespectful communication occurs, you can implement this through consistent natural consequences. When someone is chronically late, you start the activity without them. When someone repeatedly cancels plans, you stop making plans with them. When someone treats you poorly, you reduce your emotional availability to them. Timing is crucial. You must be consistent from the first occurrence, not wait until you're frustrated or resentful. Consequences should be delivered from a place of clarity, not emotional punishment. The key is to keep your actions aligned with your values, regardless of how others respond. You're not trying to control their behavior. You're demonstrating your own. The psychology behind teaching by example exploits the power of operant conditioning. People tend to repeat behaviors that are rewarded and avoid behaviors that result in unpleasant natural consequences. When you consistently reward respectful behavior with your presence and attention, and allow disrespectful behavior to result in natural distance, you are effectively shaping behavior. Psychologically, this works because it is more powerful than verbal arguments. Actions communicate values more clearly and memorably than words. The mechanism works by creating behavioral associations. When respectful treatment consistently results in positive interactions with you, and disrespect results in reduced access to you, people naturally adjust their behavior. Neurologically, this activates experience-based learning systems in others' brains. They literally learn how to interact with you through behavioral feedback. People respond because they learn through direct experience what kind of energy and behavior works well for you versus what doesn't. Rule 6. The balance between vulnerability and strength. The tactic. You practice selective vulnerability, sharing deep aspects of yourself only with people who have consistently demonstrated that they deserve that level of intimacy and who can hold their vulnerability with care. Emotional openness is a privilege that must be earned. This approach is based on the understanding that indiscriminate vulnerability is not authenticity. It's a lack of self-preservation. True intimacy requires gradualness and reciprocity. Implementing this requires you to develop discernment about who in your life has demonstrated the ability to hold personal information with respect, who responds to vulnerability with support versus who uses it against you, and who reciprocates emotional openness versus who just receives it. You can apply this through gradual testing, sharing small vulnerabilities first, and observing how they're received before sharing deeper aspects. With people who demonstrate trustworthiness, you can gradually deepen the level of openness. The most effective contexts are developing relationships, where you're assessing the appropriate level of intimacy. With established relationships, this may mean reassessing whether current levels of openness are healthy. Avoid using this rule to become closed off or suspicious by default. The goal is conscious vulnerability, not emotional isolation. The art is recognizing that not everyone in your life needs or deserves access to the most intimate aspects of who you are. The psychology behind selective vulnerability exploits the psychological principle that healthy intimacy requires reciprocity and the gradual building of trust. When you share indiscriminately, you may inadvertently devalue your own emotional openness. From an attachment psychology perspective, this works because it recognizes that not all people have the emotional capacity or maturity to responsibly hold others' vulnerabilities. Psychologically, this activates what researchers call appropriately calibrated intimacy, levels of openness that correspond to the level of security and reciprocity in the relationship. The mechanism works by creating value through scarcity. When your vulnerability is not available to everyone, it becomes more precious to those who receive it. Neurologically, this protects your nervous system from overexposure. Sharing deep aspects of yourself activates neurological vulnerability, which must be balanced with safe environments. People respond by valuing your trust more because they recognize that it was consciously chosen, not automatically given. Rule 7. Maintaining personal dignity as non-negotiable. Tactic. Regardless of how close the relationship or how intense the emotional pressure, you maintain an inviolable standard of personal dignity, never stooping to behaviors that violate your core values or compromise your self-respect. Dignity is your anchor in all relational storms. This rule operates on the fundamental principle that you can love deeply without losing yourself, and that maintaining personal dignity is actually a gift to the relationship, not a limitation. In practice, this means never begging for love, never accepting abusive treatment for love, never violating your own values to please others, and never allowing fear of loss to lead you to desperate or self-degrading behavior. You can implement this through regular check-ins with your core values. Does this action honor who I want to be? Am I acting out of love or fear? If I saw a friend doing this, what would I think? When your actions are out of alignment with your dignity, You correct course. Timing is crucial. Dignity must be maintained, especially during conflicts, when the temptation to lower oneself is greatest. It is in these moments that maintaining high standards is both most important and most difficult. The secret is recognizing that people respect those who respect themselves. When you consistently maintain dignity, you teach others to treat you with the same level of respect you show yourself. Avoid confusing dignity with rigidity or superiority. True dignity is humble but firm, loving but not submissive. The psychology behind maintaining personal dignity activates what psychologists call behavioral self-respect. When you act consistently with your values, you strengthen your identity and self-esteem. This creates a positive cycle where self-respect generates respect from others. Psychologically, this works because dignity communicated through behavior is more powerful than dignity claimed through words. When you model self-respect, you unconsciously teach others about their worth. The mechanism works by creating behavioral expectations. When you consistently behave with dignity, others naturally raise their own expectations about how to interact with you. Neurologically, maintaining dignity strengthens neural networks associated with self-control and values-based decision-making, improving your overall ability to act with integrity. From an evolutionary perspective, this touches on social hierarchy dynamics. People naturally respect those who demonstrate self-control and behavioral integrity. People respond with increased respect because personal dignity suggests strength of character and emotional stability, qualities that generate security and admiration in relationships. 4. The mindset shift. These rules aren't just isolated tactics to be used sporadically. They represent a fundamental shift in how you approach all relationships in your life. When you master the art of emotional fortitude, you develop the ability to love from a position of strength, not need. You stop trying to earn love through submission and start attracting respect through integrity and conscious self-care. You internalize these laws. You're not just learning to be more assertive. You're developing a deeper understanding of how healthy relationships actually work. You begin to see that loving someone includes loving yourself enough to maintain standards that protect the quality of your connection. This is the difference between being a compulsive giver and being a conscious giver, between accepting any treatment out of love and demanding respectful treatment because you understand it serves the relationship, between being afraid to set boundaries and recognizing that boundaries are expressions of self-love and mutual responsibility. True emotional mastery isn't about never feeling vulnerable or becoming invulnerable to hurt. Mastery is about maintaining your integrity and dignity even when you love deeply, about protecting your energy even when you care intensely. When you operate from this heightened emotional awareness, you stop teaching people to disrespect you through your own neglect of boundaries and begin to model the kind of love that uplifts both you and those you love. When you operate from this heightened consciousness, your relationships become more authentic, respectful, and sustainable because they are based on conscious choice, not desperate need. 5. The mastery of art. The ability to maintain emotional fortitude in intimate relationships is perhaps the most liberating skill you can develop because it transforms love from a vulnerability into a strength. The rules we've just explored aren't abstract theories. They're fundamental principles of healthy relationships that operate independently of your awareness of them. The difference is that you now have the choice to remain in patterns that drain your energy or develop emotional mastery that protects and nurtures genuine connections. An emotionally strong person isn't someone who never gets hurt or loves deeply. They're someone who can love intensely without losing themselves, who can be vulnerable without becoming a victim, who can give generously without burning out. Remember, knowledge without application is just intellectual entertainment. Real power comes from consistently practicing conscious self-care, carefully observing how your actions affect relational dynamics, and the courage to maintain high standards even when it's easier to compromise. Every relationship in your life will now become an opportunity to apply these laws with compassion and firmness. Every moment of pressure to compromise your dignity will be a chance to demonstrate that you understand the difference between love and needless sacrifice. True love doesn't require you to lose yourself. It invites you to become the best version of yourself. If this video changed your perspective on emotional strength and healthy relationships, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content on authentic personal development. In the comments, tell me which of these 7 rules had the greatest impact on your thinking about boundaries and self-respect, and share a time when you observed how maintaining personal dignity improved, rather than harmed, an important relationship. Emotional mastery begins with awareness, and awareness begins now.